Broadway Joe. Men wanted to be like him, women wanted to be with him. He lit it up on the field as well as off, wearing his signature fur coat. Joe Namath became a larger-than-life figure. His cultural impact can't be understated. As Hall of Fame cornerback Mel Blount said, he set the bar for what a superstar is. Namath dated models and actresses, dressed with style, hung out in nightclubs, and he spoke openly about his active sex life. This was not the norm back then, but he came at the perfect time. The 60s and early 70s were times of social and political change, and Namath became a representation of this movement. Being in Broadway Joe's presence was like being in the presence of Elvis. Some people even compared it to like one of the Beatles. He had an aura. One night he was leaving a club with a woman, and his teammate made some sort of comment about the attractiveness of her. Basically, she wasn't close to being a 10. Broadway Joe retorted, "It's 3 in the morning, and Miss America just ain't coming in." Another instance of Namath's off-field presence included a brief retirement. Commissioner Pete Rozelle demanded Namath sell his stake in the club, Bachelors 3, as it was believed to be a hangout for mobsters. But he didn't want to, so he retired instead. He announced that he was retiring, stating he did nothing wrong. Well, he'd only be in retirement for a few months. Namath tried to keep the club, but after he saw Rozelle wouldn't budge even after retirement, he was forced to sell. But beyond the glitz, Namath was also making his mark on the field. He attended the University of Alabama, where he'd be coached by legendary Bear Bryant, who would say Namath was the greatest athlete he ever coached. He was the first player to throw over 4,000 yards, something that wouldn't be matched for 12 years, and he's the only one to do it in a 14-game season. He led the Jets to the infamous Super Bowl III victory over the Baltimore Colts, who were 18-point favorites. He announced days before the game, "We're going to win the game, I guarantee it," after someone said how the Colts were going to destroy the Jets. After the game, a reporter went up to Namath and said, "You're king of the hill." He replied, No, we're king of the hill. We got the team, brother." And he was right. Namath didn't throw a touchdown that game, and the Jets defense stepped up big time. But don't get it twisted. It's not like he didn't play his part, reading the defense systematically a drive at a time.
It drove them crazy because they would shift to him, and then we'd run away from their strength. And no matter what they did, he would call it the other way.
And this leads us on to his legacy, which is sometimes attacked from a statistical perspective. He threw a lot of interceptions. Over his career, he had 173 touchdowns and 220 interceptions. But he also threw a lot of passes that could not be covered and no other quarterback could throw. While he threw a lot of interceptions even for the time, if you look at his career as a whole, he was an elite passer that tore up teams for many years. And the final 3 years of his career really brings down his overall numbers. I got this table from footballperspective.com, and it shows Namath was a top 3 quarterback from 1965 to 1974. He was also masterful at avoiding the sack. As the article notes, thanks to Namath, the Jets became the first team to throw 500 plus pass attempts but take fewer than 10 sacks. That's only been done by the 88 and 89 Dolphins since. In defeating the Colts in a huge upset, he gave the AFL legitimacy. The Colts had the NFL's second-ranked defense, had outscored opponents by 258 points in the regular season, and were part of the NFL, which was considered far superior to the AFL, a belief that Namath would shatter. He also gave the AFL legitimacy when he signed with the Jets for $427,000. The NFL was seen as the place to get paid more. But with this massive contract at the time, the AFL now looked different. What followed was a bidding war between the two leagues. The NFL would seek a merger to avoid rapidly increasing salaries. Namath going to the Jets and subsequent victory over the NFL cannot be overlooked in the importance of the overall direction of the league. He would deal with injuries throughout the 70s, only throwing more than 5 touchdowns 3 of his last 8 years. He broke his wrist in 1970 and injured his knee in 1971, so he only played 8 games in those 2 years. But in 1972, he would lead the league in passing yards and touchdowns and propel the Jets to the second-ranked offense in both points and yards. In 1973, he'd suffer a shoulder injury, putting him out for most of the year. He would come back in 1974 though and win Comeback Player of the Year. After this, his career was basically over, despite playing 3 more years, putting up terrible numbers. Yet this is the man who spent the night with a whiskey bottle and a female companion in a hotel room before an AFL championship game. Yet, when he stepped on the field, he did not disappoint. Alright, thanks for watching.